So yeah, so I'm thrilled. Beth, Bill and I met a couple years ago, and we talked about all the programs that Assisting Hands offers for free around Montgomery County, and we had talked about getting in touch with Denise and Beth, and it takes time to make it all happen. So I'm thrilled to be here, and I hope we can continue to have a long relationship of education and camaraderie. I think it's great. I learned so much from these programs because everybody has a unique experience. Whatever the subject matter I tend to turn up, somebody's got some stories about it, and I learned so much from that. So I appreciate you feeling comfortable to share. We are being recorded. We have mentioned before that if you don't want to be part of the filming, to sit on the other side so that you're not getting incidental camera on you. So let me tell you a little bit about me and why you should believe what I'm saying. So I come from a long career in arts and healing. I'm a creative. I make art. I like to share that experience with other people. And when I found that I was a single mom, I realized that I wanted to work during the hours when my kids were in school. So I was looking for the population that was available to me to teach art to from 9 to 3. And who are they? Seniors. If you teach in public school, you'd never leave at 3. And you're working round the clock. Yeah. So I started working in nursing homes through an organization called Art for the Aging, which just celebrated their 25th or 6th anniversary. And what this organization did is they actually trained artists to work with people with dementia and other cognitive and physical challenges, so that when they went into the nursing home or the assisted living, they'd be aware of what the potential for the creativity part would be. And so that was fantastic. But what I found is that we were only in there like once a month. And so many of the people in these communities wanted a lot more than that. So I actually proposed to the one that was closest to my house, my kids' school, which happened to be the Hebrew home down on Montrose Road, that we should start an artist in residence program, that I would be a full-time artist for them from 9 to 3, 5 days a week. And I didn't tell them then, but my kids ended up volunteering there thousands of hours. And it became a best practice for the area and then the nation. And so with that, I took that kind of dog and pony show on the road and created arts and healing programs in lots of different communities, including the Veterans Medical Center, which to this day is my most challenging organization to work with. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Fast forward, 35 years, my kids are grown, they're out of college, blah, 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 gone. And I decided to get back full-time in the studio, only to meet somebody who was working with Steve Loberbaum, who owns Assisting Hands, saying that they wanted to add something special to their home care that would set them apart. And so I said, well, creativity. What home care company is actually looking at how the caregiver and the client are both being creative and trying to make that part of the match? So that's what happened, and I promised him I'd be there 5 years. It's now 7, and I'm still counting. So I really like the mission of the organization. It's very education forward. We want all of the families in Montgomery County to know about hospice, palliative care, hospital visits, dementia, you name it. We want to provide that educational service so that people are more, what did they call it, the Sims store? Educated consumers. We're all, bright and capable, and we should be able to figure these things out, but they're just so strange, right? You get these diseases and they mess with your head and you don't know why, and the next thing you know, you're in the hospital. The worst case scenario, right? You don't really want to be in a hospital. They're amazing, and they do fix people most of the time, so hats off to that whole process. But it's very, very challenging for someone who hasn't been in a hospital. So how many people here have recently had a hospital visit for themselves? Let's start with that. Okay. And how many people have visited somebody in the hospital recently, right? And how many of you have actually had to advocate for somebody who was in the hospital, a parent or a child or whatever? Okay. So Holy Cross Hospital did my stitches when I was 12 and flew off my bicycle. So they're forever in my heart. They've grown tremendously. We're very, very fortunate in Montgomery County to have some fantastic hospitals. So there's nothing I'm going to say that's a negative about a hospital. It's more about how we communicate with our loved ones about what they need and what they want, or our friends. Say, you know, somebody has an accident and they go to the hospital, and some people, you know, A, don't like visiting hospitals because you can get sick there when there's something going around the hospital. But B, it's just not a comfortable zone. So when I was a little kid, I'm the youngest of 10 grandchildren, and my grandfather had 9 consecutive heart attacks. There was no remedies in those days. There was no bypass surgery. There was no, you know, carotid artery cleaning outs. You know, they grew up on chicken fat. They had chicken fat in their blood veins, I guess. And so I was often in a hospital visiting my grandfather and with all my family. And so it kind of seemed like a normal place. That's where you go to visit grandpa, kind of thing. So I just, you know, some people come at it, you know, they don't want to be in a hospital, they don't want to be near it. So what I like about Bonnie Friedman, and she lives in Silver Spring and would be here if she didn't have grandchildren now to tend to. But she wrote this book because her husband, Bob, had been in and out of the hospital for decades. And when it first started, it was a heart attack. Her kids are twins, 7-year-olds. They're now grown up with grandchildren. And she didn't know anything. She's a, you know, federal communications expert. So she decided after all of those years of experiencing this, and Bob did survive, and they've had a lovely life together. But a lot of it was mysterious, and it wasn't broken down well for the visitor. And subsequently, since this book came out, there's been some other really big national studies done about hospitals and people who work in hospitals and people who have to go to hospitals, patients and visitors. And there's like every patient, I forget what the statistic is, but it's something like they get 70 touches a day. I don't mean lovely massage touches. I mean like person comes into your room touches. The janitor, the, you know, the blood taker, the medicine checker, the this, the that, the other thing. And how can you record all that? I mean, you're sick, first of all. You're not feeling well if you're in the hospital. So how do you pay attention to all the people that have come in your room? Now, you would think in this day and age there'd be some sort of like band or something that the person could wear when they come in the room, and it jots it down somewhere on a whiteboard, and you'd say, oh, look, it's Felicia Madada or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of crazy names in there. It's not all Jane Does. So you have to not only be able to hear well enough to understand, but to understand once you hear it. A lot of complications, right? In the meantime, you're not feeling great, and you may be a little agitated. Who knows? You may be really drugged, you know, to be calm, so you're really in la-la land. So it's really great when you can have somebody else there with you advocating. So Bonnie spent a lot of time in the hospital, and I'm just going to read to you this little bit about her. When someone you love is hospitalized, it can be frightening for family and friends as well as for the patient. A hospital may seem like a foreign land. Sounds, smells, and culture are unfamiliar. Even the medical terminology sounds like another language. Understanding the hospital environment and knowing how to navigate its complicated pathways can make you a strong, effective champion for a loved one or friend. And that really resonates with me. I feel like you have to go at it like you're visiting a foreign country, and Bill could probably tell you all sorts of stories about travel and overseas. You walk into a place and you don't know the language, you don't understand what the sign says. You know, they give you something to eat, you've never ever experienced that food before. Is this breakfast or lunch? You know, so this is why we talk about this book. Subsequently, Assisting Hands put together with Steve's notes this book, which I gave all of you, called Thriving at Home. And basically, it too is notes on how not to go to the hospital. So there are different sections, and I just want to make sure. I think by now everybody's figured out that I gave you a pen and a sticky notepad. There's also room in the back of this book that you now own to write notes if you don't like the sticky pad. And so this chapter 3 is what I was going to sort of start with, was how to prepare for a hospital stay. So how many people have had like a knee or a hip replacement so far? Okay, 2. So you know that there's preparation involved in that visit, and your loved ones are all going to know that you're going to be at the hospital, hopefully, and they're going to be prepared for you when you come out of the hospital with ice packs and rollators or whatever it is you need to get back on your feet. So that's a really like the best possible visit, right, to a hospital, because you know you're going to get something better out of it, and it's up to you to make sure that you follow up with all the PT and OT to get the best possible product from that surgery. You've probably met your surgeon fully clothed and with your head on your shoulders. You weren't knocked out or in la la land and coming to with the stranger in your room. You know who you're going to go to. So it's kind of a different experience. But are there things that you wish somebody had told you before you went? Go ahead.
Well, I just had a knee replacement, and nobody, I mean, they told me, they just kept saying everybody's different, and I understand that, but they really didn't tell me how. Well, to me, it was really painful. It was the most, I've had back surgery and stuff, and this was the most painful surgery I've ever had. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I had to, at night, call my husband because I couldn't climb stairs, so he had to come down to just, if I had to get out of bed to go to the bathroom or anything.
Sure.
I wasn't aware of that. I thought I'd just hop around.
Well, there you go.
I wasn't hopping.
Yeah, so note to self, right?
Yeah, and I wasn't aware of that. They just didn't really, I think, fully describe what
could happen.
Yeah.
Hospitals are, you know, if you are discharged from the hospital and you come back within so many days, they get fined. You're not supposed to come back that fast for the same problem or for a similar problem. So feedback is really important, and they all want to be 5-star, and they all want to be the best hospital in the area. And what's great, because like I said before, we're so fortunate, we've got the Johns Hopkins group, we've got the MedStar group, we've got Suburban, well, Suburban's Hopkins, but we've got Adventist. So they're all trying to one-up each other. You know, my dad had a massive stroke 20 years ago. There was no stroke center in Montgomery County at the time. We had to helicopter him up to Baltimore, to Maryland. So it's just an interesting, you know, like we're at a really good place with hospitals right now, and they're always trying to make it more community related. And so anytime you have questions or comments like that, they love to hear that. And if you can't, you know, if you don't feel like you're being heard, go up a notch. And that's what Bonnie talks about a lot too. So let me, before we dive into some of these different scenarios, are there any other expectations from the group in terms of what you'd like to learn today? I know one person talked about learning about hospice, and I can certainly touch on that. Anybody else have a particular thing?
Kidney dialysis information. I feel my husband is on dialysis now, polycystic kidney disease, but I tell people it's like you go up to a door and you open it and it's dark and you have no idea what's going on. And to get, like you say, you get information. It's not contradictory. You're not, they give you all this paperwork, but I go to Facebook groups with people that have had transfers or transplants or the same disease to find out their personal experiences, and I'm learning things that way.
That's great.
You know, at the hospital, they're like, la la la, everything's great, goodbye.
Right. Thank you. I'll put it on my notes. Yeah, go ahead.
My husband had a stroke recently, and he's been in 5 different hospitals.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The stroke was beginning of April, so he's still in.
Wow.
And every facility you go in is like, oh yeah, we're wonderful, we'll tell you all this information. You don't get information. Like, there's no way. And you can talk to a case manager, and they're like, oh sure, we're here to help you. no problem, but they're here to help you out of their facility into the next facility. So it's,
Very challenging.
I have really had to fight for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not unusual.
I guess continuing what she's saying is like if you never have experience with hospitals, like if something happened, I would not, and there's so many choices now, I would have no idea where to start, you know, or like which hospitals are good for certain things. I mean,
Right.
I would like to be informed on that, you know, like in our area, maybe there's a particular hospital that's better for strokes, you know, I don't know anything about, like I have no idea who I would call.
So being that we're in Poolsville,
Yeah.
when you call 911, where do you expect to go?
Was that what you would do, call 911?
Well, if it's an emergency, that's what you do.
Shady Grove.
Shady Grove.
They ask you, I mean,
No, they don't.
Depending on what
You've
you,
been asked twice.
and for what kinds
If
of,
it's a heart issue, they're going to take you to Shady Grove because
Yeah.
it's
We've
close.
Closest.
been asked twice, what's your preferred facility?
and what kind of injuries? What were you remedying?
Well.
Like a fall or-
It was a heart attack
Oh.
scare, and it was a gallbladder issue. Yeah.
Because usually they do take you to the closest, because that's,
Yeah.
but, you know, in our area, we don't have like country hospitals. They're all regional hospitals. They all have lots of services. And I hear you. I mean, it's frustrating when you're anxious yourself and you have to figure out a whole new world, like the brave new world that Bonnie's talking about. Anybody else have an expectation?
And even to
Oh,
your point, when you're trying to find good care for different things, you know, for certain things, everybody's trying to outdo each other. So of course, we're wonderful, you know, we have all these 5-star reviews.
Right.
You know, you can't really put faith in that. So it's really hard to know where to get true
Yeah.
information.
And it's true, I guess you have to depend on, you know, what the issue is to pick a hospital. But like, is Frederick known for certain things versus Shady Grove?
so I know nothing about Frederick Hospital.
Okay.
But we're currently working with Frederick Health Hospice, and they work a lot with the hospital. So if somebody said to me, I'm going to be at Frederick Hospital, what can you tell me? I would refer them to Frederick Health Hospice and let them lead the way on that, because I don't know that one.
Then do you have to be in Frederick County, I guess?
No, it's just whatever would be closest. And like I said, if they can't serve you there, then they medevac you. Heal-evac, that's not a word. Everybody over 18 should have assigned a POA in case of emergency, a medical POA, and have an advance directive.
Make sure it's a general POA, because if your spouse has a stroke
Right.
and is in a coma for a while, you have no access to their financial.
Unless you have a POA,
financial,
right.
And a medical POA will not
No.
take care of that.
No, that's not financial. It has to be a financial, right.
Financial or general.
Right.
to cover that.
Good point. Power of attorney. It's a little piece of paper, but it has a ton of power. And the advance directive should also now have a dementia form. There's a new form out for folks to make decisions now about how they want to be treated and how things should happen for them if they have cognitive challenges through dementia.
My husband mentioned something to me this morning that he heard that dementia is now being looked at as like a form of diabetes. I don't know if anybody else has
Health
heard that.
related.
Yeah, that it's like a diabetes 3. So
I don't know. Haven't heard that one?
for that.
So there's 2 websites, and I can, when I send back the link and all that, I can put some other notes in there too. But one is called Voice Your Choice. It's a free way to create your advance directive online. And the wonderful thing about it is that my friend Jane Markley, who worked on this for decades, she's a retired Navy nurse, thankfully, the state of Maryland has agreed that this particular Voice My Choice populates when you go to the hospital. So your advance directive comes up as soon as they put in your social security and your name, date of birth. So you don't have to carry it around with you.
But you have to make one.
You have to have it signed, yes, please.
Now, who do you go to?
If you're traveling, you probably should have it with you, just like you have your passport.
Where do you get that done?
The advance directive?
Yeah.
So Voice Your Choice is an online form, and it has great questions. We also use 5 Wishes, which is a little more touchy-feely. But any of those work. Attorneys can put it together for you if you're working with an, if you have a family attorney, that's an easy enough thing for them to do too. But it requires you to really think about how you want to be treated if things aren't going well for you. And it's a conversation that's challenging to have. And the second most important thing to having an advance directive is to let the people know who are your designated drivers in the case of this situation, what it says. Have the conversation once a year. Talk to your kids or your sweetheart or whoever's going to be that designated power of attorney for medical and say, this is still how I want it to go. If I'm whatever, I don't even want to go in those scenarios, but whatever scenario you can cook up in your head, if I have dementia, if I have Parkinson's, if I have, if I'm having a heart attack or a stroke that eliminates my brain from functioning, how do I want to be treated by the doctors? Because when you go to a hospital, what's their number one reason for you being there? Insurance. That's good. Money is it's not the number one thing, I'll say, but they're supposed to keep you alive. They're supposed to fix you. And if you don't want to be fixed, you need an advocate right there and then saying, no, 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 no. My dad told me, if 90% of his body is not functioning, we are not recharging this man. We are not, do not resuscitate is in action here. And a DNR is part of your advance directive. Now, you might not be ready for a DNR right now, but you need to let your family members know where that line is drawn, where that happens. I had a dear friend who was a smoker, liked to drink her whiskey, and lovely artist, creative, wonderful mother, grandmother, all that. And she had a massive stroke. And by the time her daughter lived nearby, and by the time the daughter got over there, she could tell that her mom was really gone. And the EMTs were like, does she have a DNR? And so they didn't resuscitate, they just moved her to the hospital and she died within a couple hours. So it wasn't really what her daughter wanted to be doing. She really wanted to make her mom better, but she knew that her mom would not want to be at all compromised in her life and would want to go out like that. It's hard stuff. So, So let's talk a little bit about how to prepare for a hospital stay. So it's chapter 3, page 23, and basically I'm just going to touch on some of the points because I like you to be familiar with this book. It's kind of a fun read, this book. It goes through a lot of different possibilities, and I think it's the kind of thing where it reads really fast. So if you read it once and make some notes, or we put some sticky notes in, but if you want to put more in, or turn down pages, whatever, it helps to remind you, like, oh, I should put this with my go bag because I may need more of this information when I get there. So designating an emergency contact in advance. So we had a client who felt like he was having a heart attack, and the first thing he did was call 911, and the second thing he did was he opened his front door and then he passed out. And thankfully he did that because it saved his life, because the EMTs didn't have to hunt around for his wife, who happened to be 2 hours away at their grandchild that day, to break down the door. They didn't have to break down the door. Uh-oh, that was my microphone. Is that okay? So, so first thing you want to do is designate who's going to be there for you. Does everybody have a sense of that, or got a clue on that one? That's a pretty easy one, right? Okay, bring necessary documentation. What does that mean? What do you need? For the most part, you don't want to have your wallet and keys there because they could get lost in the room transfers and all that stuff. So you want to have your designated person take all that with them. But you still, when you first get to the hospital, you do need ID and insurance card, right? And if you're on Voice Your Choice, your advance directive is populated. If not, then like Bill was saying, have somebody send it right over, or just have it with you. How many people here have a File for Life? I saw them over there. It's a little red thing that used to be great because you could put it on your refrigerators, but now refrigerators aren't always magnetic. But it's basically, oh, you got it right there. Okay. Oh, good. Pass it around so everybody can see. It's kind of a pain in the neck because you have to handwrite everything really teeny tiny. You can do it on the computer and stick it in that envelope. It's fine too. It doesn't have to be on that piece of paper. But the idea is that every EMT knows, all of our emergency guys know, gals and guys know, that if you have a file for life on your fridge, they will open it and they will take it with them to in the ambulance.
We had a fire presentation a number of months ago, and he was insistent about that.
Yeah.
He was very.
Where do you get that?
I usually have some in my bag, but I saw some up there. I don't think I have any today.
When we got them from the county, they gave us 500 of them. So we have enough.
You have plenty. Okay, great. That's great. All right, so necessary document, power of attorney, insurance card, we talked about that. Okay. And then I love this part. Bring something that you want to do while you're at the hospital, and not just your phone and your charger. I mean, you could have a go back. You know, if you know you're going for surgery, right, bring your, is this a clarinet or something you're playing? So make sure you have something, crossword puzzles, books. You know, obviously your designated person can bring all that for you the next day. But if you know you have to go to the hospital for a few days for whatever surgery or whatever, plan ahead. You know, bring a comfy top and a bottom. You know, they're always taking things off and on to test you for different things. So make sure you're not in anything too complicated. And of course, make sure all the household stuff is taken care of. So we work with a lot of solo agers, which means they don't have any family in the area. They may have family, but they're not in the area, they're not nearby, and they're not coming in for an emergency that fast. You know, my daughter lives in Malaysia. Go figure how long it's going to take her to get back. So, you know, you want to make sure that if you're going to leave your house for any number of days, that there's nothing rotting in the refrigerator. You know, this is something you can ask a friendly neighbor to take care of for you. Oh, I had to go to the hospital in emergency, but I'm so worried how I left my kitchen sink and my refrigerator. Can you just run in? I can't imagine any friend wouldn't be willing to do that. And make sure that a key is with somebody else to your house so that people can do that. And do nice things, like maybe throw in a load of laundry. Go figure. I'm coming home from the hospital and all my laundry's folded in on my bed. How nice. And of course, catch up on things you've been meaning to do. This always cracks me up because how many people have to-do lists that we'll never get to done? So, of course, you know, try emptying your emails and all that stuff, but anymore, we all just, you know, kind of cruise along with that. So any questions about a planned hospital visit like that, like what you do need to bring with you? So you check in at the front, they give you a band, you're now in the hospital system, and then they should be explaining to you what your next steps are. The one thing I really love about Bonnie's book is she talks a lot about, you know, the vinegar oil, the sugar vinegar concept. I'm sure you played this role with your husband. It's a good cop, bad cop. Does it sound familiar? So because I was in the industry, my mom was always the good cop. She always brought the fruit tray and the donuts and always told everybody how beautiful their outfits were that day, blah, blah, blah. And I would come in and say, you know, my dad hasn't had a care plan review and Jacob's law says blah, 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 blah. You know, so you kind of have to be wary of who you're asking. For people who are doing direct service, like the CNAs and the nursing staff, they are exhausted, always. I don't care whether it's post-COVID or pre-COVID, they're always overworked. They work 12-hour shifts by choice, and this is our standard, is this 12-hour shift thing. They're tired, they're, you know, overwhelmed. But if you can come in and be like Mary Sunshine and say, oh, my husband's in room 4, I've been so happy with you guys, you've been so supportive, it goes a long way. A simple compliment, maybe you bring them a fruit basket or some clementines or something. It starts going out through the population that there's a nice family who's aware of how hard this work is. And then there's different kinds of doctors, right? There's the attending. There's the Hospitalist, thank you. Do people know what a hospitalist is?
No.
This is a doctor hired by the hospital to be sort of the general practitioner for a group of patients. They usually have a very big caseload, and they usually need to come in and spend at least a few minutes with you just to introduce themselves and find out, the general picture of how you're feeling. They're supposed to take in all the different pieces. So if you've come in with a heart condition, but you end up having a urinary tract infection, that would come under that hospitalist umbrella. The cardiologist takes care of the heart, and then the UTI, is usually, they would do an antibiotic or something. I'm not a doctor, so don't count on my words on that. But there's attending doctors, there's hospitalists, there's residents. If you're in a teaching hospital like Georgetown or GW, there's students, 3rd and 4th year students that are going to come through. And who do you really ask for what you need? If it's an issue with billing, do you talk to your doctor about that? Heck no, he's not going to know anything. They don't even think about it. So who do you go to find out about that? Usually if you can connect with 1 or 2 people on a case, you're really lucky. So a favorite nurse and maybe one of the docs that you really, that you seem to be able to converse with. Because they've got also a million things going on. Our health system is broken in that way that they're not able to give the communication time that they need. And now, how many of you have gone to a restaurant or a grocery store or a Home Depot and gotten an email back saying, oh, rate us on how we're doing? How many of those do you get a day, right? Plenty. Well, guess what? The hospitals need those too. They need their 5-star rating, they need their comments. So now they have an outreach person, I don't even know the name of it, but they circulate through the hospital rooms too, and they kind of come in after you've sort of stabilized a bit, and maybe you're going to be discharged soon, because they want to catch you at a time when you're feeling your best, and so that you'll write good things. So again, this person could be your best friend, because they're really trying to make this the best hospital stay for you that you've ever had. So if you say to them, hey, my client, my loved one pushed the buzzer for 15 minutes last night and never got help going to the bathroom or whatever, they could make some moves on that. They have the inside scoop on how that works. But that's like the newest thing that I've heard about. Well, we have blind trust, right? Because we don't know as much as they know. And that's part of their mystique or whatever. I was going to say shtick, but it's very difficult, right? Because you want to help your loved one. At the same time, you don't want to thwart the doctor and make them not like your family, and do something egregious, which I don't think they would do. But it's just the sugar vinegar thing. It's like, if you say nice things, people react nice to you. If you say mean things, people go, uh-oh, we got a crazy, we're not going to be able to deal with this. So you just have to sort of balance that out. It really does help to have more than one person, as long as you both are on the same page. You don't want your wacky sister coming in and throwing the whole thing off because she's got attitude about hospitals. That happens with family members too. But if you're all on the same page for the person's health who's sick, and one person wants to be that bean counter and the other person can be the sort of fluffy, then that seems to help too. But
in my experience, my mom had a stroke, and my dad would have been the likely person to step in, but he had mental illness at the time. So I'm from a big family of 9 kids, and we had problems communicating with the doctors, and the doctors had problems communicating with each other, but they were telling us polar opposite type of things. And then we were all coming in from different places in the country because we were all spread out, and my mother couldn't advocate for herself, she couldn't speak. And I found that one of the things was what was everybody's definition of if she did get better, what was going to be your quality of life.
Exactly.
And across the 9 kids, we all had different definitions of quality of life, you know. So that would probably be a good thing to try to communicate.
Ahead of time, yeah. That's a,
A good discussion.
thank you for sharing that. That's huge.
That-
And
that-
you're right. It's like, who takes point, you know? And again, designating your power of attorney to be someone that you know can take point for you. It doesn't have to be your children. They may not be the ones that are going to be your best advisors, but try not to make it somebody too much older than you because, you know, you want them to be there. You know, it's, some of it is just practical knowledge, right? All right, go ahead.
My daughter said, because she's concerned about her stepdad's medical condition, she said, you can ask for a patient advocate if you're in the hospital?
Yes.
And who would that, who is that person? From social work, from nursing, where do they come from?
Well, that's kind of this, right, it's kind of the patient coordination side. And you can also hire a care manager, which was like another thing that you can do. So if you're sort of stumbling, or if you have a group of 9 people from all over the country, you might just want to designate a care manager. And they're, you know, $150, $200 an hour, worth every penny. They know the system, and they will do all the different pieces of it. So from, you know, making sure that the right doctors are getting the information to, you know, following up on the discharge plan, helping you assess whether you need home care, post-surgery or post-hospital visit. They can be super helpful. A patient advocate in the hospital, I'm going to assume that, I don't know if that's required for all hospitals, but you should be assigned a care manager, like a social worker for your case, or case manager. So those are also very busy people with lots of cases. So finding the right time, Bonnie talks about, you know, if you can be there early in the morning before the shift changes. Sometimes you can get a lot more information from the shift that's leaving than you'll get from when you get there and the shift has only started 2 hours ago for them. They don't know that much about your loved one and what's going on. So they have to catch up and read and follow up. So if you feel, you know, like you don't want your family members dealing with all this, you can hire a care manager in advance. We work with a lot of those. And for a much smaller fee, they'll do like for a fee, they will take like your whole history and understanding. And then they put you sort of on a back burner until you need them. And then when you need them, and I think they do like a 6-month check-in. Like, anything change? No? Okay. And then 6 months later, anything change? Well, yeah, I broke my hip or whatever. But you would have probably connected with them if you'd had an episode. So, you know, they try to stay in, it's kind of like having on retainer, that was the word I was looking for. So you hire a care manager to be there for you as your designated person. And that can be very helpful for a lot of families who don't have a clue how to deal with any of this. In terms of staying overnight, you have to suss that out for yourself, and depending on what your family member's needing, you need to protect yourself and make sure that you're not exhausted and spent to really advocate well for your loved one. If you haven't gotten a night's sleep and you want something done by somebody else, you're going to be grumpy. That's what sleep deprivation does. So,
a lot of places that won't allow you to stay.
right, they usually boot you out by 9 o'clock. I mean, if you've got a really, you know, sweet case or something, they might let you stay a little later. But it's better for you to sleep at home because you'll actually sleep maybe and actually eat some decent food. You know, hospitals have gotten a little better with food, but, you know, in terms of like picking up something at the cafeteria or whatever, you know, it's nice when somebody brings you food. So you want to make sure that you're caring for the caregiver and that often goes overlooked. The other thing I always recommend to people when they go to the hospital is to start a journal. And I don't care if it's the back of a newspaper or back of an envelope, whatever's handy for you, grab a notepad, put it in that go bag we talked about before, because you want to be writing down not only all the different things that are going on. George stepped in to clean the wound. Dr. So-and-so came in to talk about discharge plans. Nurse so-and-so dropped in to do this or that. But you also can write your feelings in there. And studies have shown that writing gratitude journals, saying what you are thankful for, I don't want to get too woo-woo, but it's the reality of how our brains are wired, that if we can smile, we will feel better. You can fake the smile, but you're still going to feel better because our brain reads the smile as, oh, she feels good. Let's do something about that. So you want to make sure you can have a place to write your feelings, what's going on, day one, very difficult, mom's not looking so good, day two, so it's good to be able to go back and see where, oh, this was a whole lot worse yesterday, but now we're doing this, so it's getting better. She's on antibiotics now, and look, her mental capacity is coming back because she had a UTI and it messed with her brain, or so many things. So a journal is my number one go-to. I always suggest that. And also making sure that you've told your posse. So, and by that I mean, your closest friends and families are all going to be worried and concerned. Is there somebody you can designate so that you don't have to answer 25 or 55 texts every day? Can you just say, talk to Joan? There's now some wonderful little apps that people put together. There's one for Meal Train. I'm sure some of you might have used Meal Trains here before. So if you want to, have food brought to your house, you've got a family to feed still and you've got to be at the hospital all day. Or there's also an app that you write, it's kind of like a Facebook page. You write in there what you want people to know, and then they can find it. You don't have to respond to each person's text messages. Just a few other tips before we close up. I think I mentioned before that there's certain hours of the day when people can be better talked to. So if you have if you're, a long-term situation with a doctor in a hospital, there may be better times than others to ask him questions that you want to get more into. You were saying, you didn't know what the plan was and he wasn't explaining it very well. Well, he may be heading into surgery at that minute and doesn't really want to take the time to deal with all that, which isn't the best move maybe, but it's always good to ask them. Just say, well, when do you have office hours? When can I stop by, and then this is in the hospital. When can I stop by? And I know this isn't the best time for you because you're, got to do all these rounds this morning, but I have like 3 questions that I really need an answer to. Be specific. They are busy. They're saving lives. They want to go on to their next journey, How many of you have ever worked in the health field? Do we have any nurses or doctors in the field? Okay.
Adjacent medical, I was a massage therapist,
Oh.
I worked in hospitals.
Oh, wow, so Yeah, so you had some backdoor knowledge,
Yeah.
right? Behind the house knowledge. It's like, if you've, when you're an actor and you know what's going on behind the stage. Well, that's how these doctors and nurses are, and if you can kind of empathize with that, like they're on. And they have to not only be on and not skip a line, because if they skip a line, they could hurt somebody. So they have to be really focused and on. So the best thing you can do to support that for your loved one is to be that, sane, calm, never, more like, oh, well, let's talk about when we can, have a real visit and maybe you can stop back at 5 o'clock, or maybe you need to go catch them for a coffee. You can always say, hey, can I buy you a coffee, or, sit down with you for 5 minutes because I just have these few questions. Don't go in with a laundry list of questions. That's not going to help them or you. And it's not, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do the Facebook online groups. There are so many groups now online who have had experiences that you may be close to, your experience. It doesn't hurt to ask other people. We talk a lot about, in this county, about the village movement and connecting with people in your neighborhood who can help you do small things. This is a perfect time to make sure that that group, if you belong to a church group or you belong to a book club or a Zumba class, they had a great Zumba class here, this is the time to lean in and say, you know what, I do need some help. I'm going to be at the hospital all day. My dog really needs to get out twice or thrice or whatever. Or, I could really use some help figuring out how to figure out these forms. One of your neighbors may have been a medical transcriber for all you know and knows all about those forms. Mm-hmm. So please, please, please don't hesitate to ask for support. It is so important. You don't have to be out there alone. As the caregiver, as the client.
I had a friend a few years ago whose young wife was dealing with his cancer, and they lived in Silver Spring. He had to go to Baltimore for treatment. She used this app called LOTSA, L-O-T-S-A, Helping Hands.
Oh, okay.
Do you know that one? You can schedule rides, you can schedule.
Oh, that's great.
And so I just kind of looked it up because I remembered.
That's a cool one. I'll look at it.
Lots of helping hands. And so then you can get to know people or people you know, and you talk, and sharing messaging too. We talked about sharing messaging about what's going on.
Right.
So she did that, and it was pretty good.
That's great. So, in my role as Director of Community Relations for Assisting Hands Home Care in Potomac, we have a lot of clients every day, right? So we have caregivers out in maybe 175 different ways throughout the county. And they're all backed up by expert nurses. So, if something is different in the family, if the loved one is showing signs of something different, a fever or dizziness or whatever, we have a process that's very quick to get back to the nurses. So again, if you're going to be discharging from the hospital and you're exhausted already from being at the hospital for 3 or 4 days, don't hesitate to call me and just say, hey, we need some help for a couple of days while I get back on my feet. We do short cases like that. We do 24/7 round-the-clock cases too. And we're totally available to help just talk you down. If you're having a really bad time at that hospital and you want some help, don't hesitate to call and just say, look, this is what's going on. What can I do? Where can I go from here?
Do you have an hourly fee that you charge?
Yeah, we're not the most expensive. We're not the least expensive in the county. We're around between 34 and 44 an hour, depending on how many consecutive hours. The way home care works is, the more hours, the less it costs. So a 12-hour a day case would be like 34. So we're all over the place doing programs like this, but we also are really good at the home care thing. We got it down, and we have the most incredibly generous caregivers. I just find I love hanging out with them and meeting them and learning their stories because they are so giving and so kind, and they really want to do more than just take care of the activities of daily living, the ADLs that we're, privileged to do for them. They want to do more than that, so we had a family call and say, my mom loves to sing hymns. And I said, okay. So I put that in the metrics, and we did find a caregiver who could do all the ADLs and drive her where she wants to go, and also sang hymns. And it's like, they may not be the same hymns, but they're both spiritual ladies, and they're going to get together a lot better than if it's somebody who doesn't get that. So we try our best. Any other questions?
Just a cautionary tale. If you find that you're bringing a loved one into an emergency, you're in a situation where they need immediate attention, and the hospital gets too busy to get to them, you can ask to be transferred to another hospital. And we didn't do that. We didn't know we could do that. And that made all the difference in the world. We lost my mother-in-law.
Wow.
Because the doctor never came down and he said, well, we've just got these crash victims that just came in.
Oh,
and
my
we have
God.
to deal with this, and I'm called into surgery, and she'll have to wait until her gallbladder burst.
Oh, my
That was the
goodness.
end of it.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. The other thing that it may just be my perception, but there does seem to be a bit of a bias against older seniors. You're in your 90s.
Yeah.
Am I going to pay attention to the 55-year-old who's got a lot to live?
The triage question.
Yeah, the true, and I found it even with the nursing staff, was that in some cases, it was just, well, this is more important. I'll get around to her when I can.
So one of the things, I'm going to gift a hospital warrior to the group, and so you guys can use it in your library or whatever, pass it around. And one of the things I like about it is in the back, she has, she's super organized. So she's got like a spreadsheet for every doctor and with the questions she was going to ask about that particular situation. And then she's got a whole list of resources as well, with a checklist and all sorts of really practical things that some of them that we've talked about and some others that we just didn't have time. But I think, again, it's worth a read. You can always, I think they may still sell it on Amazon. She had been doing a blog, a podcast called Hospital Warrior, and I'm sure some of those are, I'm sure they're all on YouTube somewhere if you want to listen to more of her. And then, of course, we did an interview with her when the book first came out, so I've got that on YouTube, which I'll send the link. It's also on our website. If you go to our website, we have tons of educational videos. I did about 40 of these book chats during COVID, and we haven't done that many more. We're getting ready to do a new one. A friend of ours has written Hands on Mindfulness, and it's about how important working with your hands is for keeping your brain active. And so maybe we can do a book program. That's in the fall. The other thing I was going to say is, we didn't talk that much about hospice and palliative care, but again, the hospital is about fixing you. Palliative care is about keeping you comfortable. Hospice is a philosophy, not typically a place, like palliative care. It's also a philosophy. And hospice adds more comfort to the palliative care. So they know, some people do graduate from hospice. Don't get me wrong. When you get all that extra attention, sometimes the body comes back together. So we can talk more about those if you have other questions. I'm happy to chat about that. And I should let you know that I run several programs called Death Cafe, where we talk openly about death and dying and practical practical ways that you can plan a good death. I call that the plan A. But then plan B happens. So how do you plan for plan B? And so we talk about that. We talk about green burials. There's all sorts of new things. Aquamation instead of cremation, because it's better for the ozone layer. I mean, there's just so many things about death that we just don't talk about in a regular way. So we started these groups, and they're actually very fun. I do one a month on Zoom. And then I do one for the Potomac Village. I'm getting ready to start doing them in person, I think, for the Kensington Village. And then I do them as I call it Death Cafe 101, where I'll come to a group that just wants to know what a death cafe is, and we'll talk about that. And then if they want to continue, we continue.
That's another great topic.
More topics.
We need some explanation in the blurb.
If you go to the Potomac Village website, they have a great blurb in there about why people would want to get together for that. But anyway, I thank you all. Your comments were fantastic, and I so appreciate your listening. There's enough about this subject. We could probably fill a whole afternoon, but I think you got some good pointers. I hope so.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, guys. Yay.
And, you're gifting the book?
Yeah,
if there's anybody who wants to